Hey, this is Dr. Ferguson. We're going to do a little punctuation practice using commas. We're going to look at two things, asides, sometimes called interrupters. These are things that happen in the middle of a sentence that's really not necessary, and so we need to set it off with commas on each side. And then we have ending clauses. These are clauses that come at the end of the sentence. They can be a little confusing. They differ from dependent clauses because they cannot be moved to the beginning of the sentence. Usually they begin with a relative pronoun like which or whichever, who, whoever, whose, whomever, and they really show a distinct shift in the sentence, and they need to be set off with a comma. So we're going to practice with a few sentences to try to get the hang of this. So our first sentence is this. This tree, which is a Douglas fir, is probably about 50 years old based on its diameter. So hit pause, take a few minutes, and see if you can get the commas in the right place. All right, so this tree, which is a Douglas fir, is probably about 50 years old based upon its diameter. So we can hear that this phrase, which is a Douglas fir, is in the middle of this sentence, and we could take this out. So we can see right here, if we just scratch through that, this tree is probably about 50 years old based on its diameter. So since I could scratch this out, then I need to set this off with commas. So I need a comma before which, and I need a comma after fir. So this is an aside or an interrupter. So I really have to be able to hear this. Think of it as a parenthetical phrase. And so in this sentence, tree is my subject and is my verb. All right, so let's take a look at another one. The bathroom tiles, whenever time permits, require a good scrubbing. So pause, see if you can get this one. Okay, so the bathroom tiles, whenever time permits, require a good scrubbing. So this phrase, whenever time permits, is an aside. You see, I could take this out. The bathroom tiles require a good scrubbing. This is a really important one to see on the ACT English section. They'll put some phrases like this relative pronoun phrase in between the subject and the verb to see if you know how to match the subject and the verb. So since this is an aside, a parenthetical phrase, then I need to set it off with commas on each side like this. The bathroom tiles, whenever time permits, require a good scrubbing. All right, let's look at this one. If you bought me a drink, I could be convinced to go out even though I don't really feel like it. Okay, so pause and see if you can get the commas for this sentence. Okay, so there's a couple of things going on in this sentence. And so I really need to be able to sort out the different clauses in this sentence. So first I see this dependent clause to begin a sentence. If you bought me a drink. So as we see in the complex sentence video, if I have a dependent clause at the beginning of a sentence, then that's going to require a comma. Now I have this, I could be convinced to go out. We can see that's a sentence. That could stand all by itself. I could be convinced to go out. And then I have this clause at the end of the sentence, even though I don't really feel like it. Okay, so on this sentence, I need a comma after this introductory phrase, which is also a dependent clause in this case. Now, I don't need a comma before even because that's a dependent clause that could be moved to the front of that sentence. So this is different than an ending clause that could not be moved around in the sentence. So if we look at it this way, even though I don't really feel like going out, there's a dependent clause, and I moved that to the beginning of this sentence. And then I have my independent clause, I could be convinced, and then this clause at the end, if you bought me a drink. So in this sentence, I need a comma after this opening dependent clause, even though I don't really feel like going out, comma, I could be convinced if you bought me a drink. Okay, so it's a little tricky. I have to understand the distinction of what an ending clause is versus a dependent clause. So this is a dependent clause at the end of this sentence, and it does not need a comma. Now, let's look at another sentence. Jack got hit in the shoulder by a baseball, which hurt a lot. So here we have Jack got hit in the shoulder by a baseball. There's the core of my sentence. My subject is Jack, and then my verb is got hit. Now, this phrase, which hurt a lot, has a distinct shift. Remember that the purpose of punctuation is to make my sentence easier for the reader to understand. So this is a relative pronoun phrase. It's a distinct shift, and so I need a comma before it. Okay, one more sentence. Peter was rejected by Julia, who already has a boyfriend. Okay, so I can see here that this is the core of my sentence. Peter was rejected by Julia. So Peter is my subject, was rejected is my verb, and here I have this relative pronoun clause. It's a distinct shift. It's added to the end of the sentence. Notice I couldn't switch this around. I cannot say, who already has a boyfriend, Peter was rejected by Julia. So that is my hint that this is an ending clause, and I need a comma before it. Peter was rejected by Julia, who already has a boyfriend.